My name is Joyce Fletcher. I'm one of the counselors here, and along with my co-worker,
I'm Natanya. I'm another counselor here at the college.
We're going to talk about how to survive and thrive in the first year of college. And we also have some orientation leaders with us today. The other two are hiding in the hallway since they're on.
My name is Greg, and I'm going to be starting my second year at COD in the fall. I plan to get my associates in the spring, and then I want to transfer to Lewis University next fall for aviation management.
So, Greg, how did you get interested in aviation management since the other two aren't here?
I'm just really passionate about aviation, and I just wanted to go into like the administration portion of that industry. So, I don't know. I guess that's how.
And do you have a pilot's license?
Yes, I do. I have my private pilot's license, so I'm a pilot. Woo!
Okay.
Hi, my name is Sora, and this is gonna be my second year at COD, and I'm gonna transfer next year to DuPage. Yeah, my major is accounting.
Great. And what happened to Taz? Is he hiding? Yeah. Okay. We'll catch up with him later. What we want to do is talk about what you can do to really thrive, not just survive, but thrive in your first year at COD. So I guess what we'd like to start with is finding out what are some of the things that you've heard are different between college and high school. Have you heard anything? Shout it. You need to shout it out so that it can be heard.
Not everybody at once. So do you think it's going to be exactly the same? So
schedule. How is the schedule different?
You have not as many classes spread out throughout the week.
Okay, so not as many classes. So you're not in school as many hours, and you have a little bit more control of your schedule, right? What else?
It's more independent. You better do more things on your own. People aren't really nagging you. You constantly get things done. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And I get your drift. Yeah, it's now all what we think of as the responsibility is kind of transferred from your parents, your teachers, your deans, whatever, and now it's your responsibility to figure out how you're going to get it all done.
Yeah, that was my drift.
Okay, I got your drift then. Okay.
Yes.
You can choose more of your classes directed towards what you want to do instead of taking a lot of requirements to graduate.
So you have a little bit more of a say in what you want, and then you can also focus on what you want and not have to take too many classes and things that you don't want. You do have to take some, potentially, but not necessarily everything. Right. What else?
Okay, well then we're going to get into that and try to help you think of what some of those things might be that might be a little bit different. We're going to be talking about 4 tips that we think are going to be really important for you, and you've touched on some of these already. The first one is how you use your time, and as you've mentioned, you have more independence, you have sort of control over your schedule, so how are you going to use that time? We're going to talk about that. We're also going to be talking about one thing that's really important, and that is reading your syllabus, understanding the requirements, and using that as a guide for you in your classes. We'll also be talking about the importance of getting to know your professors here and also other resources on campus. And lastly, we're going to be talking about you. How do you take care of your personal health, your physical health and your mental health? So first of all, we want to talk about planning your time. Who can tell me how many hours there are in a week? Whoa. Ooh, somebody's good at math, yay. 168, that's right. There are 168 hours in the week, so every week you kind of start with a bank account full of 168 hours. So our question to you is, how do you plan to use that time? Now, we'll tell you that if you're a full-time student, you're taking probably between 12 and 19 credit hours a semester. And that means you're going to be in class somewhere around 12 to 19 hours a week. That's a little bit different than high school, isn't it? How many hours a week were you in school, in high school? 30, 35, somewhere in there, yeah. So all of a sudden, when you hear that, hey, I might only be in school 15 hours a week, what are the first things you think about how you might want to use that extra time? Sleep. What else? Work. Making money. Socially. So things like video games, hanging out with friends, just hanging out. Okay, whatever, yeah. See, there are all sorts of things that you can think of how you're going to spend your time. And yet what we want you to know is something that you mentioned, more independence. When you're in class 15 hours a week, you should plan about 2 hours for every hour you're in class in order to study for that class. So that means if you're in class 15 hours and you're down to 153 hours, you take off 30 hours of study, now all of a sudden you only have 123 hours left in your week. That doesn't sound too bad, does it? So what else might you do in that 123 hours? Sleep. Yes. How much sleep do they say you need in order to be? Between 6 and 8 hours, right. 7 and 8 usually is what they say, but sure. So if you did that maximum, that optimum 8 hours, 8 times 7, 56. So we're down to 67 hours. Okay, well, 67 hours is still a lot of time. How many of you are working? Keep your hands up if you're working at least 15 hours a week. How about 20 hours a week? 25 hours a week? 30 hours a week? How much are you working?
Well, I just started a job and in 2 weeks I had 80 hours.
So you're working full time.
2 weeks now, I'm just figuring only at 16. So.
Okay. And so that's something you've got to take into account. Can I handle working full-time and also being a full-time student? Sometimes students think, well, but I'm not a full-time student. I'm only in class 15 hours a week. But remember the study. If you're studying 30 hours a week, that's 45 hours. That's full-time.
So I'm going to go with the average of 20, okay?
Okay, well, so we still have 47 hours. Are there any things that you haven't done here?
Yes.
What?
Well, if I've already played with my friends for social time and my video games, well, I haven't read or watched my favorite soap opera or, well, probably sleep more. Well, I know 8 is like the maximum, but I think it's more like 12.
Okay, so you haven't slept as much as you wanted, you haven't hung out with your friends, you haven't played your video games, you haven't watched your soap opera. You haven't done your sports and any kind of exercise or working out. What else haven't you done?
So how many hours for working out? 3 for the whole week? Oh. What do you think? An hour a day, maybe? More? So 7 hours?
Do you do that?
This is not about me.
Just wondering. Okay, so what else haven't you done? Commute time. How long did it take you to get here today? Half an hour. How was parking for you? Easy, right? Yeah, congratulate yourself, because that's the last time it's ever going to be easy to park at COD. You just experienced the one time. So what we usually tell you is you need to, if it took you a half an hour to get here today, you're going to need to add some time to that, because finding a parking spot is going to take some time. Getting into the building, finding your classroom, all of that takes time. I think our students over here, I know Greg has some tips about parking, but let's see what they have to say.
So I only live like 15 minutes away, but what I do is I always leave an hour before my class starts, which may seem like excessive, but you have to factor in like parking time and walking time to your class, and like that all adds up. So it actually works out for me, but that's what I do.
Okay, I am. For those who have like a little bit like tight schedule, like for example, like last semester, I had to run like through one building to another building for 10 minutes. So I recommend those people to get a premium parking. You can park like easily and go like rush to the other school, into another class.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm going to introduce myself. I wasn't here. For that, I'm Taz. I'm a third-year student. I'm currently enrolled in the 3+1 program here at COD with Lewis University. So I'll be taking classes at Lewis as well as here. Okay, and one of my advices is parking. Yeah, just make sure if you have classes between 9 and 12, make sure you get here really early, because that's when like most classes are going on. So just make sure you have plenty of time. Otherwise, you're gonna miss your classes.
And we don't want to scare you with the parking, okay? The issue right now is today was easy breezy because you all are really the only students that are here. So classes are out for the summer, so the parking lot is wide open because you're the only ones that are here. And the people who work here. We take up a lot of space too. But what's going to happen on the first day of school is that everybody's back, right? It's the first day of school. Everyone's excited. School starts. People have new school supplies. Life is great. So everyone will be here. And so all these spots that are available will all be full. And so it will probably take you close to an hour, I would say, the first day. If you want a close parking spot, it might take you a really, really, really long time. So again, we want you to factor in how long is it going to take me to physically get into my class. So I gave you all 5 hours to commute. Yeah. And that, you know, I'd probably put a little bit more on that, but you only have 35 hours left, so.
Yeah, and I think that one thing to know about parking here is there are enough spaces. They may just not all be close. You know, I know when I was in high school, I would go to the mall with my friend, and if I didn't find parking in the front row, I'd leave. Well, that's not a good way to approach parking at COD, or you'll just not make it here, right? So you could incorporate your parking time with your exercise time, park far away, and walk. Just plan on that. So you need to have that time for that, and you're also going to, so far, you haven't eaten, you haven't showered, you haven't hung out with your family, you haven't taken care of family responsibilities. So in that 35 hours that's left, that's all the rest of that stuff. So it gets tight. So we put together a schedule of what it might look like for you if you took 16 credit hours. And we did not account in the schedule for the full 32 hours of study that would be expected for somebody taking 16 credits. We figured some of those hours would come after 10 o'clock at night, right? But that's a pretty full schedule, isn't it? And one of you said you're in charge of your schedule, so think about how you might want to use it. And to help you, we have some blank schedules that we're handing out so that you can start plotting out. When are your classes? What is your time frame? When are you going to study? Sometimes it's better to study on campus because there aren't as many distractions as there are at home.
And one of the things, too, is that you can see the way that this person sort of built their schedule. They have study time built in. But the other thing is, a lot of times people say, I want to have my classes back to back to back. I don't want to have gaps in between my classes. But if you do set up gaps in between your classes, then that's built-in study time as well. So if you have a class that meets from 10 to 10:50 and your next class isn't until noon, then that's an hour that you could be studying or preparing or reviewing for the next class as well. So when you're thinking about your schedule, I know sometimes people want to come in and get out right away, but also think about how can I best utilize my time here as well. Okay? Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is sort of your syllabus. Now, how many of you in high school had a syllabus for each class that you took? How many of you, as soon as you got the syllabus, read it all the way through, and every day you followed it to a T? So what did you do with the syllabus?
Kept it in my folder for extra credit.
Okay, kept it in the folder. Got rid of it because it was useless? Anything else? How many of you were reminded about when assignments were due by your professor or instructors in high school? We have a quiz next week. We have a paper due. Make sure you're working on your paper. Make sure you read. Let's talk about what we read. Sound familiar? Yes? Okay, that's going to all change. Okay? When you're here, your syllabus becomes your contract with your professor. When they give it to you, whether they give it to you in a paper version or on Blackboard, so we'll talk about Blackboard a little bit more, when you get your syllabus, that is your contract for your course. Some instructors will actually do a quiz on the syllabus to make sure that you read it. Other instructors will have you sign it as an agreement, as a contract, so that you are responsible and you are saying, I know what's in this syllabus. Because what tends to happen towards the middle end of the semester is people hear a lot of, well, I didn't know. I didn't know that that was what your attendance policy was. I didn't know that I couldn't hand the paper in late. I didn't know that whatever you might not have known. That was clearly indicated in the syllabus. So again, if it's in the syllabus, you're responsible for it. So read it. It becomes important. So it can't just sit in a folder, okay? It's important that you know what the course requirements are. What are the expectations for that particular instructor for that course? It's also important that you keep track of everything that you have to do for that particular course as well. One of the things that we recommend is after the first week, or even as the week is progressing, lay out all your syllabi and then input into your phone, into a planner, whatever, everything that you have due and when you have it due. So that way there's no surprise when on a random Tuesday you have 3 tests and a paper due. So at least you can plan ahead. So when we think about that schedule we had up, you can plan ahead to know when you might need more study time that particular week as well, okay? It's also important that you remember and know when assignments are due, because you may not get reminded about them. An instructor may not remind you that there's a quiz coming up. They may not remind you that your paper is due. They might mention it if a student in the class has a question about it, but it's not their responsibility to remind you of what you have to do because, again, it's in the syllabus. It's important, again, to read your textbooks. How many of you have gotten your books already? A few. How was that price tag on those books that you got? Hefty. So, again, considering the amount of money that you're spending on books, open them, use them well. Because, again, your textbook in high school, you probably went over the textbook a lot, and you talked about the readings in class. In college, you may be responsible for readings that the instructor doesn't go over in class because they want the readings to be supplemental to what they're talking about in their particular lectures. So it's important that you read it. It's important that you know, even if you don't talk about it in class, you may still be responsible for it on an exam as well. That was one of the hardest things I had to transition into. I'm like, oh, we didn't talk about it. I don't need to worry about it. And then boom, 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 5 questions on the readings, and I was like, oops. Note to self, next time read. So again, it's important to keep up with the textbooks. The other thing we want to talk about is attend class, even if attendance isn't taken. So when you were in high school, if you didn't go to class, what happened? You got what?
You got marked.
You got marked. What else?
Truancy ticket.
Ooh. I always hated that word, truancy. Yes, a truancy ticket if that happened. What else? Detention. A call home. That was the worst. That was the worst. So, yes, there were immediate consequences. There were immediate consequences if you were late to class, right? So that is also a big difference between college and high school. In college, if you miss class, no one is calling you to say, hey, you missed class. No one is calling your parents to say, hey, your son or daughter missed class. So the important thing to realize is that the way that attendance becomes part of your grade could vary from class to class. There are some instructors who lay out that tardiness counts for something. If you miss X amount of classes, your grade is affected in X amount of ways. So if you miss 3 classes, maybe your grade is docked a full letter grade, and that's your whole semester grade, not just, for a test or a quiz. Other instructors say, we're going to treat you like adults. You know the importance of being here, so if you're not here, you don't get the material, and that's sort of it. But it varies from instructor to instructor, so it becomes important that you sort of keep track of that. You want to tell them the example of Andrew's instructor?
Okay, this is not the typical instructor, but my son was a student here, and he took a class where the instructor had an attendance policy. 3 absences, you fail the class, or more than 3 absences. But he also had a late policy that if you were late by 5 minutes, he closed and locked the door and you couldn't enter. This was a 9 a.m. class. We've already talked about parking. Difficult at 9 a.m. All of a sudden, my son ended up missing 3 of those classes because he was late. He had to withdraw from the class. So just be aware that every instructor can have a different attendance policy, and you need to pay attention to what it is, and it will probably be on that Syllabus, right? So really pay attention to the syllabus. They're different in college than they were in high school.
Did we scare you on the attendance? No. The other thing about attendance as well, if you end up having to miss class for any reason, things come up, make sure you let your instructor know. If you know you're going to miss class ahead of time, let them know, because it also, we'll talk about the importance of communicating with your professor in a little bit, but it helps them to know that you're engaged, and it matters to you that you've missed class, as opposed to, them feeling like you may have just sort of blown it off, okay? So things happen, and it's important that you just sort of communicate that as well, okay?
Which leads us to our next area to talk about, which is getting to know your professors and the other resources on campus. One thing we want you to know right off the bat is, yes, your professors are a resource. Sometimes people have the idea, well, in elementary school, in high school, I had teachers. Now I have professors. That sounds kind of lofty and scary and unapproachable. And so sometimes students think, oh, I can't really talk to this person. But your professors are there to help you learn, and so it's important for you to keep that communication open. Who can tell me some things that you can do as a student in the class to communicate to your professor that you're interested in that class? Ask questions. That's a good one. What else? Meet outside of class. Excellent. What else? Do the work. Yep. Some of you are doing some of the things that help communicate interest. Yeah, you look at them and pay attention, you make eye contact. What are some of those things that communicate to your professor that you're not so interested? Sleeping. Texting. That's a big one. You think that we can't see you if you're in the back of the room texting? We can see that. Yeah, and some professors will call you on it, others will kind of let it go, but they'll notice. Yeah. What else? Okay, so you're getting an idea. There's things that you can do that help communicate. One of the things that help show that you're interested is sitting toward the front. And that does something that communicates to the professor your interest, and it also helps you stay more involved and interested. Because I know when I sit in the front, I'm much more attentive, partially because I've blocked out all of those distractions behind me. So think about that. Think about, how can I let that professor know that I'm really interested in the class and what's going on? Also, there are lots of other resources on campus that we want you to know about and use. Our computer lab is excellent. It's in the Student Resource Center. You just were in there for the large group meeting. In the computer lab, there are people that can help you. There are computers available. And because there are computers and printers available, that excuse that almost every professor has heard at some time or another, my computer wasn't working or my printer broke, isn't really a very good excuse, because we have that resource available for you. Also, the library, and I think that Chuck probably mentioned that this morning, that we have a great library here. It's going to be under construction this next year, so it's going to be a little more limited in size, but we have great librarians who will help you. So if you have a research paper and you're not really sure where to start or where to go to find that information, go to the librarians and ask them. They'll help you. We also have something called the Learning Commons. In the Learning Commons, we have free tutoring. We have a math assistance center, writing assistance center, speech assistance center, and reading assistance center. This is a great thing. If you know that you're taking a class that's going to be a little difficult for you, plan to go to the Learning Commons and ask for a tutor. So I'm not a real sciencey kind of person. So if I were taking a physics class, I would go and ask for a physics tutor right at the beginning of the semester and meet with that tutor every week so that I can be reminded and have practice learning that. If I wait until Thanksgiving when I realize, ooh, I'm tanking in my physics class, and try to get a tutor then, I'm probably not going to get one, and it's going to be too little too late. So use these services that are available. I have a couple friends who are professional tutors who charge $50, $60 an hour, and this is free to you. But you've got to make use of it, so start early in the semester, go into the Learning Commons, and ask for that help. I know students who go to the Math Assistance Center and just work on their math homework there. So they plan that, you know, the schedule that we gave you, they plan study time, and they use that study time in the Math Assistance Center to work on their math homework so that if they have a question, they're right there. We also have a lot of electronic sources that you're going to need to know how to use. How many of you know how to log into My Access? Most of you? My Access is going to be really important for you because from My Access you can register for classes, you can check on your financial aid, you can make payments, and at the end of the semester, we don't mail your grades to you, they're posted in My Access. So that's where you'll get that information. Also, beginning this fall, all professors are being asked to have their syllabus on Blackboard, and many professors use Blackboard more, but Blackboard is an electronic management system that you need to know how to use. If you know how to log into My Access, you really know how to log into Blackboard because it's the same login. And you'll want to be able to use that and figure out your way around that because it's going to be used in most of your classes. Some professors use it exclusively. Yes?
I don't know if you know this, but for My Access and Blackboard, do you use something different to log into your email?
Your email is the same as that login, but it also says @dupage.edu.
Because I use the same thing to log in to nsi.cod.edu, and it logged me in perfectly, but when I try it on the email, it just doesn't work.
So, and I really didn't pay her off to ask this question about why doesn't it work if I log in. Okay, she'll take money, but yeah. But that happens for reasons I don't understand, not being a technical person, that sometimes those things don't work for you, but we have a student help desk, and it's in the computer lab, and there's also a number, but I don't think I remember the number for the phone number that you can call for student help. 299 something. Right, and it's on the website, but because it should work, but sometimes things for whatever reason don't. And the other thing is if you have trouble setting up that My Access login, a lot of times it's because students don't pay attention to that. Your password has to be between 6 and 9 characters. It needs a capital. It needs a number. So, but yeah. So learn how to use those. And if you don't know, don't just keep it to yourself that you don't know. A lot of people don't know, and a lot of times it doesn't work. Go get help. Ask for help, because otherwise you're going to be left behind when assignments are due on Blackboard and you don't know how to submit them. I'm going to ask our students here to talk about how you've used these resources.
Yes, one of the resources that I use the most, especially ones that you're going to use for your English classes like 1101 or 1102, it would be the library. As she mentioned, there's a great resources there. Especially there's one online, so I recommend you guys to get your library card or your ID. And there's a great database online that you could use for your research papers that will help you have a better grade, I guess.
Well, for new students, I highly recommend making appointments in Learning Commons because English is not my first language. So when I wanted to write a paper with a tutor, I had to make an appointment ahead because there was like so many people, so you don't want to wait like 1 hour over there wasting your time.
So my favorite resource would have to be Blackboard, just because like that's what your teachers are going to talk about the most. And it was kind of funny because this summer I took a psychology class, and the whole class, it was a completely paperless class. So projects, assignments, homework, everything was turned in through Blackboard. And it was funny because for the first project, I didn't really take my professor seriously, and so I come into class with a hard copy, and I'm all excited because it's the first project, and I turn it into him, and he looks at me as if I'm crazy, and then I realize, I'm like, oh, okay, he was serious. So from then on, like, I turn everything in through Blackboard, but it's also important because that's where you're going to see your grades, so if you want to see, like, how you're doing in the class, go check Blackboard, but...
And the final resource we want to make sure you know about using is us. Not just Natanya and I, but counselors in general. So counseling services is available to help you sort of navigate through this whole system, help you think about what you're going to take next semester, help you if you're having issues just trying to adjust to being in school or any kinds of personal kinds of issues that might be interfering with your success. We want to be available to you and help you. And I know that if you've tried to meet with a counselor in the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's been frustrating because there are so many students trying to get in to see us that you can't. But once school starts, it's easy to make an appointment and come in and see us, and we really do want to meet with you and help you. Sure.
The only other thing I want to say about resources is this. All of these resources exist, but they serve you no good if you don't use them. And the other thing that I know sometimes people get really frustrated about is that in high school, if you were having a hard time, everyone sort of kind of got on you and wanted to help. We want to help, but we don't, all of the different resources don't know that you're having a hard time. So it becomes really important that you reach out as soon as you feel like you're having a hard time. Because I think what tends to happen, and we're creatures of sort of habit, if you get a grade on your first quiz, you're like, oh, okay, I didn't do so well, but I'll do better on the next one. And then you don't do well on the next one. And then you say, okay, well, I can figure it out. I'll do well on the final. That's worth 50% of my grade. So I think what we're encouraging you to do is, be honest with yourself early. If you're having a hard time, we are all waiting to help you, but a lot of times we don't get to you in time. So we need you to kind of reach out to us as well. Okay? The last thing we want to talk about is the importance of your health. Okay? I see lots of you yawning this morning, and I know it's not because of me and Joyce, because we're highly entertaining. So, a lot of times, people are not getting enough sleep. So, I just want to see a show of hands. How many of you got 8 hours of sleep last night? Okay. How many of you got 6 or more hours of sleep? So 6 or 7 hours. How many of you got about 4 hours of sleep last night? How many of you got less than 4 hours of sleep last night? Some of you are not being honest. No, I'm just kidding. So, we cannot emphasize enough, and we know life is pulling you in all different directions, but sleep becomes important, because what happens when you don't have enough sleep is that you don't learn well and you don't maintain or retain information well as well. So 7 to 8 hours is optimal. We all love to have 7 to 8 hours, and there are times where we just don't get a chance to get that. But again, if you're not getting that kind of sleep, it will impact how you're doing in school. And nothing is more frustrating than you're putting in the time to study. I remember when I was in college, I would sit and study for 2, 3, 4 hours at a time, and after those 2, 3, 4 hours, I couldn't remember anything. And say, well, what happened? It was because I was so exhausted that everything that I was trying, I just couldn't retain information. And that becomes a vicious cycle as well. So trying to establish a pattern, which is why we were talking about schedules before, trying to establish a pattern of when am I going to sleep and how do I get regular sleep becomes really important as well. The other thing we want to talk about as well is your eating. So, what are your go-to foods when you're stressed out? What do you eat when you're stressed? Ice cream. What else? Starbucks. Chocolate. Chocolate's not so bad. It depends. I'm sorry? Cold fish. Okay. Goldfish. Okay. I was like, what? I was like, cold fish. Cold fish. I'm like, okay. A lot of times, I know. A lot of times when we're stressed, we tend to eat a lot of junk food because it's quick, it's easy, you're on campus, there's a vending machine, and you just sort of think, okay, I just don't have time right now to sit down and eat a balanced meal. But again, what you're putting into your body is going to have an impact on your ability to retain information as well. So limit the intake of sugar and of caffeine, okay? I know that a lot of times we intake a lot of sugar and caffeine because we're not sleeping. And so we need that sort of boost to keep us going as well. The other thing is that college and alcohol use somehow seem to be synonymous at times. So we want you to really think about, monitoring and limiting and making wise choices about your alcohol usage as well. And we do a big program in April about college students and alcohol as well. And finally, We want you to stay mentally healthy as well. College can be a time of a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of transitions that are going on. You're transitioning from high school to college. You're transitioning from, I guess if we want to say being an adolescent or being a teenager, to now everyone's sort of expecting you to be an adult. You're in college now. You're an adult. You have to be responsible for your own decisions. And that can cause a lot of pressure and a lot of stress as well. Some of you have friends that went away to school, the close friends. So then there's some loss that gets involved in that as well. And a lot of times that can feel very overwhelming. So we want you to know that there are services available for you if you do need additional help with that. And sometimes it could be things like just I'm stressed and it's impacting how I'm doing in my classes. What do I do? Some of you, how many of you get nervous before you take a test? Okay. Sometimes that nervousness can overwhelm you so much that you don't do well on the test, and that's frustrating too. So again, if you feel like there's anxiety that goes on in your test taking, you can come in and talk to us about that as well. Okay? So we are here for that. And finally,
so we hope that you'll remember some of these things we talked about. Paying attention to how you manage your time, really paying attention to your syllabus and remembering what's on it, getting to know the resources on campus and taking advantage of them, using us as resources, and taking care of your health, your physical and mental health. And we think that if you do all of those things, you'll be on your way to success, and we want to be there to help see that happen.